The dust-stained wanted poster fluttered against the jailhouse wall as Zara Lockhart stood before it, staring at her own face sketched in crude charcoal. The words "accomplice to robbery" emblazoned beneath it in bold letters that seemed to scream her shame to anyone who passed by. Arizona Territory, 1885, was unforgiving to outlaws and even more unforgiving to women who fell from grace. Zara yanked the poster down with trembling fingers, crumpling it into her palm as tears threatened to spill. 2 weeks since they'd hanged Thomas Garner, the man who'd convinced her to be his lookout while he robbed the Prescott Bank. 2 weeks as a marked woman, unable to find honest work, with whispers following her every step through Copper Creek. Ain't polite to be taking down official notices, miss. Zara spun around, coming face to face with a tall man leaning against his horse, watching her with a steady gaze. His eyes were the color of a summer storm, his face weathered by sun and wind. The silver badge pinned to his leather vest marked him as the town's sheriff. "Sheriff Mitchell Jones," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his wide-brimmed hat. "And you're Zara Lockhart, newly released from custody, if I recall." Zara straightened her back, pride being the only possession she had left. "I served my time. 2 months in that jail cell while they decided I wasn't worth hanging alongside Thomas." The sheriff's expression remained unreadable as he stepped closer, boots crunching on the sun-baked dirt of Copper Creek's Main Street. "And now you're tearing down wanted posters." "My poster," she corrected, her voice barely above a whisper. "I paid my debt. Why must I continue to be punished?" Sheriff Jones studied her for a long moment. His face, though stern, held none of the judgment she'd grown accustomed to. "The law says you're square with society." "But society rarely agrees with the law on such matters." Zara laughed bitterly, the sound harsh even to her own ears. "Society, the same society that turned a blind eye when I was starving after my father died, the same good folks who offered me no work except on my back." Her hands trembled as she smoothed her threadbare dress. "Thomas offered me food and a promise. I was a fool to believe him. Yet here you are, still in Copper Creek." The sheriff glanced down the dusty street. "Most in your situation would have moved on. With what money?" Zara shook her head. "Besides, where would I go? My face is on these posters for 50 miles in every direction." The sheriff was quiet for a long moment before speaking again. "I've got a proposition for you." Zara's eyes narrowed with suspicion. She'd heard propositions before, and they rarely ended well for women like her. "My sister runs the Silver Spur Hotel. She needs help with cleaning, cooking, bookkeeping. It's honest work. Your sister would hire me, the bank robber's accomplice." Zara couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. Sheriff Jones shrugged those broad shoulders. "Margaret doesn't much care what folks say, never has." He looked at her closely. "Can you read and write?" "My father was a schoolteacher before the consumption took him," Zara answered, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. "I can cipher accounts and write proper correspondence." "Then come by the Silver Spur tomorrow morning, early." He mounted his horse in one fluid motion. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Miss Lockhart." As he rode away, Zara stared at the crumpled wanted poster in her hand. A second chance seemed as distant as the stars that would soon fill the desert sky. The Silver Spur Hotel stood 3 stories tall, the largest building in Copper Creek, a testament to the town's prosperity from the nearby copper mines. Zara arrived just after dawn, her one good dress freshly washed and mended, her auburn hair pulled back in a simple knot. Margaret Jones was nothing like her brother. Where Sheriff Jones was tall and reserved, his sister was a small, energetic woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore a practical dress with her sleeves rolled up, already deep into the day's work despite the early hour. "So you're Zara Lockhart," Margaret said, looking her up and down without ceremony. "My brother says you need work and can keep accounts." "Yes, madam." Zara stood straight, refusing to shrink under the woman's scrutiny. "I don't care about your past, girl. What I care about is whether you'll steal from me now." The directness of the question stung, but Zara understood it. "I never stole anything in my life, madam." "I was the lookout, yes, but I never touched stolen money." Margaret's eyebrow arched. That's a fine line to draw, it's the truth. I was hungry and desperate. I made a terrible mistake, but I'm no thief. Zara met the older woman's gaze steadily. After a long moment, Margaret nodded. Fair enough. You'll start with the guest rooms. Sheets need changing, floors need sweeping. When you're done, come find me. We'll see about those bookkeeping skills. By midday, Zara's back ached from changing beds and scrubbing floors, but a sense of honest accomplishment filled her for the first time in months. She made her way downstairs to find Margaret in the small office behind the front desk. You work hard, Margaret observed, sliding a leather-bound ledger toward her. Let's see if you're as good with numbers as my brother claims. Zara opened the book, immediately recognizing the careful columns of debits and credits. These accounts need balancing for the past month. The last girl who helped me couldn't tell a debit from a hole in the ground. For the next hour, Zara worked through the figures, her mind finding comfort in the orderly progression of numbers. When she finished, she pushed the book back to Margaret. You're short $43.16 from what your records show you should have, Zara said quietly. Margaret's eyes widened slightly. Are you certain? Check my calculations if you wish, but yes. Either someone made an error recording transactions or someone's been helping themselves to my money, Margaret finished grimly. I've had suspicions about my night clerk for a while now. The hotel owner studied Zara with new interest. You'll continue with the rooms in the mornings, but I want you handling the accounts from now on. 6 days a week, Sundays off, room and board plus $8 a week. It was more than fair wages for a woman with Zara's background. Thank you, Mrs. Jones. I won't let you down, Margaret, just Margaret. The woman's stern expression softened slightly. And thank my brother. He vouched for you. Over the next 3 weeks, Zara settled into a routine at the Silver Spur. She rose before dawn, helped prepare breakfast for the guests, cleaned rooms until midday, then spent afternoons working on the hotel's accounts. The work was exhausting but honest, and if the hotel guests sometimes whispered when she passed, Zara learned to hold her head high and continue about her business. Sheriff Jones stopped by the hotel regularly, ostensibly to check on his sister, but Zara often caught his eyes following her movements. Unlike the leering looks she'd received from men in the past, his gaze held something different, something that made her chest tighten in a not unpleasant way. On a scorching afternoon in late July, Zara was checking inventory in the hotel's storeroom when she heard raised voices from the main lobby. Stepping out, she found Sheriff Jones confronting a well-dressed man whose face had gone red with anger. I'm telling you, Sheriff, my wallet was in my room this morning, $50 in cash and my railway ticket to Tucson gone. The man jabbed a finger toward Zara as she approached. And I've heard about her. Everyone knows she was part of that bank robbery. Now she's working here with access to guest rooms. Zara froze, the accusation hitting her like a physical blow. Several hotel guests had gathered in the lobby, their faces a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Sheriff Jones stood calmly, his voice level. Mr. Patterson will investigate your claim properly, but making accusations without evidence isn't helpful. Evidence, Patterson scoffed. Her reputation is evidence enough. Margaret Jones must be out of her mind employing a known criminal. That's quite enough, Mr. Patterson. Margaret appeared from the dining room, her expression thunderous. Sheriff, perhaps you should know that Mr. Patterson lost quite heavily at cards in our saloon last night. Perhaps his missing funds went to cover his gambling debts rather than into someone else's pocket. Patterson's face flushed deeper. Are you calling me a liar, madam? I'm suggesting your memory might be impaired by whiskey and poor judgment, Margaret replied evenly. Now, if you'd like to file a formal complaint, my brother will take your statement. Otherwise, I expect you to stop disrupting my business. The tension in the lobby was palpable. Zara stood rigid, feeling the weight of every stare, the judgment in every whispered comment. Sheriff Jones moved to her side, his presence solid and reassuring. I didn't take anything, Zara said quietly, for his ears alone. I wouldn't. I know, he replied, his voice equally low. Patterson's a known troublemaker, lost more than he could afford at cards from what I hear. Despite his reassurance, By evening, the story had spread through Copper Creek like wildfire. Zara's past was once again the topic of conversation in every saloon and shop. When she finally retreated to her small room at the back of the hotel, tears of frustration burned her eyes. A soft knock at her door surprised her. She opened it to find Sheriff Jones standing there, his hat in his hands. "May I come in?" he asked. Propriety dictated she refuse an unmarried woman allowing a man into her private quarters would only feed the gossip. But Zara was beyond caring about appearances. She stepped back, allowing him entry. "I wanted to make sure you were all right," he said, remaining near the door. "Today couldn't have been easy," Zara laughed bitterly. "Which part?" "Being accused of theft in front of a lobby full of people, or having my past thrown in my face yet again. Both, I imagine." The sheriff's eyes were kind. Patterson retracted his accusation. "Seems he found his wallet in his boot where he'd hidden it while drunk." Margaret extracted a public apology from him before she allowed him to check out. Relief flooded through Zara, but it was quickly replaced by weariness. "It doesn't matter. The damage is done. I'll always be the bank robber's woman." Her voice broke. "I'm worth nothing now, Sheriff." "Not in this town, not anywhere." Sheriff Jones took a step toward her, his eyes intense. "Then you'll be worth everything to me." The words hung in the air between them, startling in their sincerity. Zara stared at him, unsure she'd heard correctly. "What did you say?" she whispered. "I said you'll be worth everything to me." Mitchell Jones spoke with the certainty of a man who measured his words carefully. "I've watched you these past weeks, Zara, seen how hard you work, how you hold your head high despite everything. I admire you." Zara shook her head, disbelieving. "You can't mean that. You're the sheriff. I'm a woman who made a mistake and paid for it." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, smell the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. "The law says your debt is paid. I believe in the law. The town won't accept it. They'll never forget what I did. Then we'll make them remember everything else about you instead." His hand reached for hers, warm and calloused. Give yourself that chance." Zara looked down at their joined hands, feeling something fragile and hopeful unfurling in her chest. "I don't know if I can bear their judgment again." "You won't bear it alone." His fingers tightened around hers. "Not anymore." The next morning, Zara woke to the sound of shouting. She dressed quickly and hurried to the hotel lobby to find a crowd gathered outside. Through the window, she could see Sheriff Jones facing 3 men she recognized as miners from the Copper Queen. "What's happening?" she asked Margaret, who stood watching grimly from behind the reception desk. "Trouble," Margaret answered shortly. "Patterson's accusations stirred up old feelings. Some folks are saying my brother is compromising his position by defending you." Zara's heart sank. Just as she'd feared, her past was now threatening Mitchell's reputation as well. She moved toward the door. "Where are you going?" Margaret grabbed her arm. "To put a stop to this, I won't have him risk everything for me." Margaret's grip tightened. "You'll do no such thing. Mitchell can handle himself. Going out there will only inflame the situation." But as they watched, one of the miners shoved the sheriff, causing him to stumble back. Without thinking, Zara broke free of Margaret's grasp and pushed through the hotel doors. "Stop this," she shouted, stepping between Mitchell and the miners. "If you have a problem with me, deal with me directly. Leave Sheriff Jones out of it." The largest of the miners, a burly man with a thick beard, spat on the ground near her feet. "We got nothing to say to you, bank robber. Our business is with the sheriff who's forgotten which side of the law he's supposed to be on." Mitchell moved to place himself between Zara and the miners. "Miss Lockhart served her sentence. The law says she's free to rebuild her life. Anyone who interferes with that is breaking the law themselves." "The law," the miner scoffed. "What about justice? My cousin lost his savings in that bank robbery. Folks around here haven't forgotten." "I was wrong," Zara said, her voice carrying across the now silent street. "What I did was wrong and I'm sorry for it, but I've paid my debt. All I want now is to work honestly and live quietly." "You think sorry makes it right?" a voice called from the gathering crowd. "No," Zara answered, turning to face them all. "Nothing makes it right. But continuing to punish me won't bring back what was lost either." An uncomfortable silence fell. Then, from the back of the crowd, a woman's voice spoke up. "Let her be." Heads turned to see Mrs. Henderson, the baker's wife, step forward. "My Albert lost $30 in that robbery. But the girl's right hounding her won't bring it back, and she's working honest now." The miners looked uncertain, their righteous anger meeting unexpected resistance. The burly one glared at Mitchell. "This ain't over, Sheriff. Election's coming up in November. Folks will remember where you stand." As the crowd dispersed, Mitchell turned to Zara with concern. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her hands trembled. "You shouldn't have defended me. They're right, it could cost you your badge." "Some things are worth more than a badge," he replied quietly. Then, to her astonishment, he took her hand in full view of anyone still watching. "Would you join me for supper tonight, Miss Lockhart? There's a matter I'd like to discuss with you." The gesture was deliberate, a public statement of his regard. Zara felt a rush of both fear and something warmer, something like hope. "Yes," she said, "I would like that very much." That evening, Mitchell escorted Zara to the Copper Creek Hotel, the Silver Spur's smaller, less prestigious competitor. It was a calculated choice. They would have privacy from Margaret's watchful eye, yet be public enough to make his intentions clear to the town. They were seated at a corner table, far enough from other diners to speak privately, but visible enough that their presence together would be noted and remarked upon. Zara was acutely aware of the sidelong glances and whispers. "You're very brave," she said as they waited for their food. "Or very foolish," Mitchell smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Perhaps both. My father used to say courage and foolishness often look the same at the beginning. It's the outcome that tells them apart." "And what outcome are you hoping for, Sheriff Jones?" Zara asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "Mitchell," he corrected gently, "and I'm hoping for several outcomes. First, that you'll continue to hold your head high in this town, regardless of what some folks might say. And second," he reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, "that you might consider a future that includes me in it." Zara's breath caught. "You can't mean—" "I mean exactly that. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday, when you're ready." His eyes held hers, unflinching and sincere. "I've known since the day I saw you tearing down that poster that you were someone special, Zara Lockhart, someone worth knowing, worth fighting for." Tears threatened to spill from her eyes. "The town will never accept it. They'll say I've bewitched you or worse." "Let them talk. Words only have the power we give them." Mitchell's hand fully covered hers now. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight, just for you to consider it." Before Zara could respond, the restaurant's door burst open and a young boy rushed in, his face flushed with exertion. Sheriff Jones." "Fire at the Silver Spur." Mitchell was on his feet instantly, Zara right behind him. They raced down the street to find the Silver Spur's ground floor engulfed in flames, smoke billowing from the windows as hotel guests and staff poured out onto the street. "Margaret." Mitchell shouted, scanning the chaotic scene. "Where's my sister?" Still inside. A soot-covered man coughed, went back for the ledgers and cash box without hesitation. Mitchell charged toward the burning building. Zara grabbed his arm. "You can't go in there." "She's my sister," he said simply, pulling free and disappearing into the smoke-filled doorway. Zara stood frozen, heart pounding as she counted the seconds, then minutes. The town's volunteer fire brigade arrived with their pump wagon, men forming a bucket line from the nearby well. But the flames were growing, the heat intensifying. 5 agonizing minutes passed with no sign of Mitchell or Margaret. Unable to bear it any longer, Zara grabbed a wet cloth from the bucket line, covered her nose and mouth, and plunged into the burning hotel. The smoke was disorienting, stinging her eyes and choking her lungs. She moved low, remembering her father's teachings about fire. The main staircase was already engulfed, but she knew the back stairs that led to Margaret's office. Crawling beneath the worst of the smoke, she made her way through the kitchen and toward the rear of the building. "Mitchell," she called, voice muffled by the cloth. "Margaret." A crash from above sent her scrambling back as part of the ceiling collapsed. Through the debris, she spotted 2 figures on the back stairs, Mitchell supporting a limping Margaret, both covered in soot and coughing violently. "This way," Zara called, guiding them toward the rear exit. Together, they stumbled out into the alley behind the hotel, gasping for fresh air as they collapsed a safe distance from the building. The Ledgers, Margaret wheezed between coughs, couldn't leave them. Mitchell, his face blackened with soot, looked at Zara with a mixture of anger and fear. "What were you thinking, coming in after us? You could have been killed." Zara, still catching her breath, met his gaze steadily. "So could you? I wasn't about to stand by and watch that happen." For a moment they stared at each other, the reality of what they'd risked hanging in the air between them. Then Mitchell's expression softened and he reached out to touch her ash-smeared cheek. "Stubborn woman," he murmured. "Reckless lawman," she countered, her hand covering his. Margaret looked between them, a knowing smile breaking through her exhaustion. "If you two are finished, perhaps we could move further from my burning hotel." By dawn, the Silver Spur was a smoldering ruin. The fire brigade had managed to save the adjacent buildings, but the hotel itself was beyond salvaging. Margaret sat on a bench across the street, the rescued ledgers and cash box at her feet, watching as the last wisps of smoke rose from the charred remains. "Everything I built," she said quietly as Zara and Mitchell joined her. 15 years of work. You still have the land," Mitchell said, putting an arm around his sister's shoulders, "and insurance. You can rebuild." Margaret sighed, then straightened her spine with characteristic resilience. "Yes, I can, but not immediately." She looked at Zara. "It seems we're both without a home now, my dear." News of the fire spread quickly, and by mid-morning, the three of them were summoned to Mayor Wilson's office. The portly mayor received them with grave concern, particularly when Mitchell reported his suspicions about the fire's origin. "Arson, you say? Are you certain, Sheriff?" "The fire started in at least 3 separate locations," Mitchell confirmed. "That's not accidental." The mayor tugged nervously at his beard. "And you believe it's connected to the disagreement in front of the hotel yesterday?" "I can't prove it yet, but yes." Mayor Wilson sighed heavily. "This is most disturbing. Violence of this nature cannot be tolerated in Copper Creek." He turned to Margaret. "Mrs. Jones, the town council will assist with temporary accommodations for your displaced staff and any stranded guests. As for you personally, I understand your brother's home has room enough." "And Miss Lockhart?" Mitchell asked pointedly. The mayor's discomfort was evident. "Ah, yes. Well, given the circumstances, perhaps it would be best if Miss Lockhart considered relocating, for her own safety, of course." "No," Mitchell's voice was firm. "The arsonists targeted my sister's business because of me, because I stood up for what's right. If Miss Lockhart leaves under these conditions, it sends a message that threats and violence will be rewarded." "It's all right, Mitchell," Zara said softly. "Perhaps the mayor is right." "My presence is causing too much trouble." "Absolutely not." Mitchell turned to face her fully. "Running never solved anything, Zara, and I won't let fear drive you away." He returned his attention to the mayor. "If Miss Lockhart leaves, it will be because she chooses to, not because she's been driven out. And as sheriff, I'll find whoever set that fire, make no mistake." Mayor Wilson seemed about to argue, then thought better of it. "Very well, Sheriff. But I hope you understand the position this puts me in with certain elements in town." "I understand perfectly," Mitchell replied coolly, "and I hope they understand that arson is a hanging offense in Arizona territory." Later that afternoon, as they left the mayor's office, Margaret announced she would be staying with her friend Mrs. Peterson until arrangements could be made to rebuild. She fixed Zara with a penetrating look. "You, my dear, have a choice to make. Mrs. Peterson would welcome you as well, or—" She glanced meaningfully at her brother. Mitchell cleared his throat. "My home is modest, but there's a small guest room. It would be entirely proper, with Margaret visiting daily, of course." The offer hung in the air, its implications clear. Staying under Mitchell's roof, even with Margaret as chaperone, would be a declaration of sorts, one the town couldn't misinterpret. "People will talk," Zara said. "People already talk," Margaret replied practically. "Might as well give them something worthwhile to discuss." That evening, Zara stood on the porch of Mitchell's small house at the edge of town, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The events of the past 24 hours seemed almost dreamlike in their intensity: the confrontation, the dinner, the fire, and now this unexpected turn in her circumstances. The door opened behind her, and Mitchell stepped out, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her before leaning against the porch railing. "Margaret's settled at Mrs. Peterson's," he said. "She's already drawing up plans for the new hotel, bigger, she says, with a proper restaurant." Zara smiled. "She's remarkable. Stubborn is the word most people use." Mitchell sipped his coffee. Must run in the family. They stood in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear. Finally, Zara spoke the question that had been weighing on her mind. "Why are you doing this, Mitchell?" "Risking your position, your reputation, your safety for me. You barely know me." He turned to face her fully. "I know enough. I know you're brave and principled, even when it would be easier not to be. I know you're intelligent and hardworking. I know you face each day with dignity despite how this town has treated you." His voice softened. "And I know that when I'm with you, I feel something I've never felt before." Zara set her cup down on the porch rail, her heart beating rapidly. "And what's that?" "Hope," he said simply. "Hope for something beyond duty and obligation. Hope for a life that's richer, fuller than the one I've been living." He took her hands in his touch gentle but sure. "I meant what I said yesterday, Zara. You think you're worth nothing now, but to me, you're worth everything. And I think if you'll let yourself believe it, you could find happiness here with me." Tears filled Zara's eyes. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Afraid to hope, afraid to trust. The last time I trusted someone." "I'm not Thomas Garner," Mitchell said firmly. "I won't make promises I can't keep. What I can promise is that I'll stand by you, whatever comes. That I'll be honest with you always. And that I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust." In the silver moonlight, his face was open, vulnerable in a way the sheriff of Copper Creek rarely allowed himself to be. Zara felt something shift within her, a wall beginning to crumble, a heart beginning to thaw. "I need time," she said finally. "Not to decide if I care for you, I think we both know I do, but to be sure that I'm strong enough for this path. That I won't fail you when the pressure comes, as it surely will." Mitchell smiled, bringing her hands to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Over the following weeks, Copper Creek buzzed with gossip about the sheriff and the reformed outlaw. Some disapproved, of course, but others, more than Zara would have expected, seemed willing to give her a second chance, especially after the fire. Mrs. Henderson from the bakery offered her part-time work helping with accounts, and soon other merchants followed suit. It wasn't the life Zara had imagined for herself, but it was honest work that allowed her to hold her head high. Mitchell made good on his promise to find the arsonists. 3 miners, including the burly one who had confronted him, were arrested after a flask matching one found at the fire scene was discovered in their cabin, still smelling of kerosene. Their trial was swift, the evidence damning. When they were sentenced to 5 years in Yuma prison, Zara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Not vengeance, but justice, the real kind. Through it all, Mitchell courted her properly, with Margaret's amused approval. Sunday picnics in the desert, carefully chaperoned dinners, walks along the creek at sunset. He never pressed, never rushed, allowing Zara to set the pace of their growing relationship. 4 months after the fire, as December brought cool nights to the desert, Mitchell took Zara to see the progress on the new Silver Spur. The framework was complete, the walls going up steadily. Margaret had indeed designed it larger, with a proper dining room and more spacious guest quarters. "She's asked if you'll come back to manage the accounts when it opens," Mitchell said as they walked through the skeleton of what would become the lobby. "Says no one else can make sense of her filing system." Zara laughed. "I'd like that. It feels right somehow to be part of rebuilding." Mitchell guided her to a quiet corner where the new office would stand. Speaking of building things, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment." Zara's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small sapphire. "It was my mother's," he said softly. "Margaret insisted I should give it to you, said she'd never seen a better match than us, stubborn fools that we are." Tears filled Zara's eyes as Mitchell took her hand. I love you, Zara Lockhart. Your strength, your dignity, your heart. I want to build a life with you not despite your past, but including it because it's made you who you are today. He knelt before her on the dusty floorboards. Will you marry me? Time seemed to stand still as Zara looked down at this man who had seen value in her when she'd believed herself worthless. Who had stood beside her through fire and judgment, whose steady presence had given her the courage to rebuild herself. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, Mitchell Jones, I will marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to pull her into a tender embrace, Zara felt the last fragments of her old fears fall away. This was what redemption felt like, not the absence of a past, but the presence of a future bright enough to illuminate even the darkest corners of memory. They were married on New Year's Day, 1886, in the newly completed church, with Margaret standing as Zara's witness and Mayor Wilson himself, who had gradually become one of their strongest supporters, standing for Mitchell. The church was filled beyond capacity, not with the merely curious but with genuine well-wishers. Mrs. Henderson had baked a 3-tiered cake, and Mr. Peterson, the blacksmith, presented them with a hand-forged iron sign for their home. The Jones Residence EST, 1886. As spring bloomed across the desert, bringing wildflowers and new beginnings, the Silver Spur Hotel reopened its doors, grander than before. Zara managed the accounts 3 days a week, while also helping Mitchell organize the sheriff's office records, a task he claimed had been hopeless before her methodical touch. One evening in April, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, a daily ritual they both cherished, Mitchell handed Zara a letter that had arrived that afternoon. It's from the governor's office, he said. For you. Puzzled, Zara opened it and read slowly, her eyes widening with each line. What is it? Mitchell asked, noticing her expression. It's a pardon, Zara said, her voice trembling with disbelief. A full pardon for my role in the bank robbery, it says. It says my debt to society is officially considered paid in full and my civil rights are fully restored. She looked up at her husband. Did you do this? Mitchell smiled. I may have written a letter or two, and Margaret may have convinced Mayor Wilson to add his support, and Mrs. Henderson organized a petition that half the town signed. He took her hand. But all we did was tell the truth about who you are now. The rest was your doing through how you've lived these past months with courage and integrity. Zara leaned into his embrace, overwhelmed by the unexpected gift of this official redemption. I never thought, never imagined. You deserved this, Mitchell said firmly. A fresh start, officially recognized, though I must say, Mrs. Jones, you've already made that fresh start in every way that truly matters. As the desert sky deepened from gold to purple, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from desperate accomplice to respected wife, from outcast to community member. She thought of that day outside the jailhouse when she'd torn down her own wanted poster and a stern-eyed sheriff had offered her a chance. You were right, you know, she said softly. About what? Mitchell asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. That day when I said I was worth nothing. You said I'd be worth everything to you. She turned to face him, her eyes shining in the twilight. You made me believe it could be true. It was always true, Mitchell replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I just had the good fortune to recognize it first. As the first stars appeared above the desert, Zara Lockhart Jones knew with absolute certainty that her worth wasn't measured by a pardon or by the town's acceptance, or even by her husband's love, though she treasured all these things. It was measured by her own resilience, her capacity to rise from ashes, to build something beautiful from the ruins of mistakes. And in that knowledge, she found not just redemption, but freedom.